After a 5-year hiatus, I've decided to dust off my old Sidemount rig and get back in the water. But as I quickly learned, Sidemount diving isn't something that you can just pick up from where you left off. So 5 years ago, I sat at this table with John talking about the benefits of Sidemount diving for recreational purposes, and John, to coin a phrase, said it's pants, and he preferred a back mount twin set. And we had a great debate, and that was 5 years ago, and I haven't dived my Sidemount rig since then, which I thought was pretty crazy. So today I'm sharing with you my experience of getting my old rig out, resizing it, configuring it, and getting back in the water to dive Sidemount. Now, a bit of background about me and Sidemount. I chose to do Sidemount back in 2010 maybe, and a large part of it was because I was terrible on air. I needed to carry more air with me. 30 minutes was about as much as I could get on an 80 cubic foot cylinder on a standard 12 litre tank, and it was embarrassing. I was looking at going forward to doing my dive master, and I was the limiting factor on most dives. So I wanted to do something different. I needed multiple tanks. And a lot of people around the dive club that I was learning at were diving twin sets. And unfortunately, a lot of those people were. There was a clique within the diving community, particularly in the UK, that was this kind of, we're tech, but we're not very good at it. And if you're not tech, you're not one of us. And so if I rocked up in a twin set, I was immediately expected to be part of that clique, and I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be there. I saw this innovative new setup called Sidemount, which gave me the benefits of two tanks without the clique of twin sets, and I loved it. And so for 5 years, maybe a bit more than 5 years, I dived Sidemount very, very regularly. Some of the divers who I would have dived with in Utila in Honduras would have remembered a certain Spaniard referring to it as Sidemount, and that was cool, and that was fun. But as I progressed into my diving and dive more on closed circuit rebreather, the Sidemount rig type kind of took a back seat. So why Sidemount? If you haven't seen any other Sidemount videos and you need a little bit of potted history, why Sidemount? Well, Sidemount was a configuration developed principally by cave divers in the UK who wanted a system that meant that they could traverse into the cave entrances and get out of the cave exits a lot easier than if they're using big old twin sets. And so the idea was to split the rig in half so that you can transport it more easily, but also by not having it on your back, it meant that you could fit through some of those crazy dark tight holes that they wanted to go through. The system was picked up by the cave divers in both Florida and in Mexico, and improved until eventually around about 2010 or so it became really popular within recreational diving spheres. Now, I'm not going to go on to why it's good or why it's bad. There's another video on the channel. If you want to go and check that one out with John and I, then go and check that one out. This is just about here and now. And the here and now is I haven't touched my rig in 5 years. So what was it like? Well, I knew it wasn't going to be a case of sticking on my rig, adjusting it because some other idiot had been diving it since then and it didn't fit me anymore, adjusting the bungees, strapping on two tanks, bailing the water, and it would be perfect. I knew it wouldn't be that, but I kind of worked on a premise that since I used to dive it so often, I used to teach it relatively often, it would come back pretty quickly. It's like riding a bicycle, isn't it? Isn't it? No, it's not. If I had any aspersions that it was going to be relatively simple, very, very wrong. Now, I think maybe it would have been okay if I'd dived with a big mirror in front of me so I can see how badly I was in the water and I could adjust in the water, but you can't. You jump in and you're feeling for it. It doesn't feel right, but you can't see how right or wrong it is. It's not until Nora's taken the video and we've come back here and we've watched it and I'm like, oh God. So whilst I wasn't expecting Andy Davies kind of trim and streamline and balance, I thought it might not be too bad. side mount is an incredibly customizable setup. You can adjust just about anything and everything, from where the tank fits under your armpits, where the bungees are, how long, how short the bungees are, the height of the cam bands on the tanks, the length of the clips, clipping those to your waist. Then, of course, where those clips are around your waist, whether you're diving steel, whether you're diving aluminium, whether you put weights on the tanks because they're aluminium and you want to negate the floatiness of it. It is infinitely customizable, which means that for each one of those customizations that can improve the configuration and make you look the dogs, there's equally one of those customizations that you can get wrong and make you look like a clown. So there are some certain things that you need to think about as you are setting up your configuration, and I'll run through a quick list of those, which I thought I had and realized that no, you need to practice more and play with this more. And so the first thing is your tank valves. Your tank valves, when you're setting it up, need to be right underneath your armpit, tucked in there, nice and tight. How do you get those tank valves tucked in there? Well, you measure them. You don't guess, you don't estimate, you measure them. You stick the tank on a table and you put your arm over the top and you put the tank valve there and you adjust the cam band so that it is about the same height as your straps on your BCD will be. You want to line the two up so that you can then put a clip on there and it's at the right height for you, which means that when it's clipped on, the tank will hang and the valve will be right under your armpit, just where you want it to be. The bungees that hold the tank in, you want those to be tight, but not too tight. You want to be tight enough that they hold the tank valve in, but not too tight that they rip it into your chest, which means that the pivot point will push the tail of your tanks out. The length of the clips clipping the tank to your waist is important. Are they too long? Are they too short? What about the line connecting those clips to the tank band? Is that too long? Is it too short? And as I found, the clips I had are nice big clips, chunky clips, which means I get a whole hand around them and clip them easily to my clips. It meant that they actually had quite a lot of play in them, up and down, depending on whether the tank was positively buoyant or negatively buoyant, which affected my streamlining. Now, you can get around that by having multiple D-rings on your waist, and when the tank is heavy, clipping it further back, and when the tank is light, clipping it further forward. Or as I did, when the tank is heavy, clip it forward, and then when the tank is light, clip it back, and wonder why everything is the wrong way round. And this is where you have to dive the configuration often. And finally, adding weight or not adding weight. Now, I learned to dive side mount in steel tanks, which stay negatively buoyant all the time. And I remember when I went to Honduras and was diving aluminium tanks there, it confused the hell out of me as to why the tank bases were always rising up. And the instructor that I had and was diving with in Honduras that was helping me a lot, he got me to move a D-ring much further around so that you could clip it down and still hold that nice position. But I also played around with putting weights, just a kilo, on the foot of each tank, which meant that the tank had a characteristic that was much more similar to steel tanks all the time. But of course, if you clip it to the wrong clip to start with, then your tank looks more like front mount than side mount. So the crux of it, of where I'm getting to, is that if I've learned one thing from my experience, it is that it doesn't matter how many times you have dived side mounts, it doesn't matter how proficient you once were at it. If you don't dive this configuration often, you'll get significant skill fade really, really quickly. If your rig has been adjusted, worn by somebody else, it will take a few dives to get it back to just how you like it. So one of the things that I've realized that if I want to continue to dive side mount again, I'm gonna need to go and do some refresher training, and I think that's important. Yes, side mount instructor, paddy side mount instructor, blah 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 blah, all great. Haven't touched it more than 5 times in 10 years. I need some refresher training, and if I was gonna go and do some refresher training, I couldn't pick somebody better than Andy Davies at Scuba Tech Philippines in Subic Bay, who's considered one of the top side mount divers in the world. He's also quite a harsh critic, and I'm pretty certain will critique this video and tell me how awful I am. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. So side mount diving, recreational or technical? As John said 5 years ago, it's fiddly, it's cumbersome, it's lots of hoses and cables everywhere, and your routing is right. And he's absolutely right. It is all of those things. It's also a great configuration for controlling your buoyancy and your trim, for having multi-tank gas supply and being able to dive and extend the range of your diving if that's what you wanted to do. But more importantly, unlike back mount, as we said 5 years ago, back mount was never cool. Side mount still is. So I may not be a side mount pro anymore. I may not even consider myself to be a side mount diver anymore, but I was excited and I am excited to get back in the water with my old Hollis SMS 50, give it a good run for its money and see whether I can rediscover what made me fall in love with side mount diving in the first place. Dive number 1, yeah, that wasn't so good. That wasn't so good, but let's see what dive number 10 looks like. So if you're somebody who is thinking about trying side mount, or you're like me and coming back to side mount after a significant amount of time away, do yourself a favor. Get yourself back to an instructor who dives the configuration as either their primary configuration or dives it a hell of a lot, and do some refresher training. There's a massive, massive difference, and I'll be the first one to put my hand up and say that. There is a massive, massive difference between an instructor who has dived side mount a few times and got a cert to teach it, self-certification or something, and somebody who knows what they're doing. 10 years ago, I would say that I knew what I was doing. Now, skill fade. I don't. Even I'll go and take a course, and even I'll go and work with somebody who is a side mount instructor and teaches and dives this configuration frequently. Well, thank you very much for joining me on this journey, this terrible journey back into side mount diving. I hope you pick something up from this, from my experience, and you've enjoyed this video. If you have, splash down on the subscribe button, hit the like, dingle the bell, and check us back some other time for some of our new deep diving content. Most importantly, stay diving, stay safe, and I'll see you guys soon.